Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to STEMtastic Live, and you've now joined the STEMtastic Careers panel session. You have joined with your cameras and mics off. This session is being recorded, and if you want to be able to watch it at a later date, it will be on the STEMtastic website from next week. So this is an interactive session. It's an opportunity for you to ask lots of questions from our skilled ambassadors. If you want to ask questions, you'll be able to, if you just hover over the bottom of your screen, there is a chat bubble for you to click on, and you can ask your questions into the chat. Your questions can't be seen by anybody else who is attending the session. Those questions can only be seen by us, the panelists. So welcome to today's career panel. My name's Nadine Payne. I'm the Director of STEM Partnerships at the college, at West Suffolk College here, and I'm introducing our ambassadors today. It's going to be an opportunity for you to find out about a range of STEM careers. So if you've got any burning questions about what's inspired these different STEM ambassadors to go into the careers that they're currently following, then this is a good opportunity for you to do so. So your panelists that we have with us today currently are Elaine Duncan. So she's from Charles Rivers Laboratories, and she'll be able to give you a little bit of an insight into what she does shortly. We've got Rad Sharma online as well. She's a graduate in mechanical engineering from Newcastle University. So she's going to tell you a little bit about what inspired her and the sort of mechanisms for going through university and studying engineering. And we've also got Elizabeth Hawke, who is currently doing a year in industry with a medical device engineering consultancy group called Springboard Pro. So they're going to be able to tell you some different aspects of following a career in STEM. So I think what we'll do is we'll go over to the panelists and let them introduce themselves and then give you a little bit more background into what they do, and then we'll open the floor up to questions and see if you've got any burning questions to ask. So, Elaine, we'll start with you.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Duncan. I'm a scientist at Charles River Laboratories. So we're an early stage drug discovery company, which means that, so I'm a biologist. I design experiments in vitro, which means like on glass. It means that we don't use any animals or any humans. Everything is done on cells in culture or just purified proteins. So the work that we do to design these experiments means that we can test new potential drug molecules, and then the chemists can then make them into better medicines. The work that we do is probably like 10 to 15 years away from actually being available on the market. Which is why we call it early stage drug discovery. So Charles River as a company is it's what we call a contract research organization, which means that we work on behalf of other clients, which is really great in one way because it means that we do a huge variety of things. We work on lots of different diseases. We work on lots of different targets. Most of us are usually juggling more than one project at a time. Annoyingly, that means that I can't tell you very much about what it is that I actually do because it's not really my work to tell. But I know quite a lot about the pharmaceutical industry, so I'm really happy to answer questions about that sort of thing. I graduated from Cambridge a couple of years ago. So yeah, again, relatively new to the industry. So any questions about things like subject choices, applying to uni, that sort of thing, I'm very happy to answer those sort of things as well.
Paul has just joined the panel, so I'm just going to introduce Paul very quickly and then give him a moment to compose himself. So Paul has had a career in defence and space. He's worked for Airbus for 43 plus years and is now retired and has joined us today to give us a little bit more information about careers within that particular sector. So if I go to Elizabeth, just to explain a little bit more about what she does.
Hi everyone, so I'm Elizabeth, I'm 19, I'm currently on my gap year and I'm doing an industrial placement at a company called Springboard Pro. So what Springboard is it's a medical device engineering consultancy. So we don't work on any of our own products. What we do is a client will come to us with an idea or a problem, and then we'll help them to solve it. So I'm doing that through the EDT Year in Industry scheme. So you can find the link to that on this slide here. And so the EDT do not only the Year in Industry scheme, but they also do different taster courses for university and things like that. And then the other thing that I'm quite involved in is the opportunity directory. So I'm the STEM team lead. And what we're doing is we're kind of putting together kind of careers advice and resources for young people and university students. So for A-levels, I did maths, further maths, physics and chemistry, which are pretty standard engineering A-levels to take. I think we'll probably be talking about that a bit more later.
And Rad?
Unmute myself. Hi, I'm Rad. I graduated from Newcastle University last year, having done MEng mechanical engineering, and I now work for an industrial printing and coding company, sorry, called Videojet Technology. I've only just started there because it all got a little bit delayed with the coronavirus and stuff, but yeah, I just started there as a mechanical engineer.
Lovely, thank you. And Paul? Paul, we can't. Paul, you're on mute. Paul, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Perfect.
Yeah, right. Hi, my name's Paul McMahon. I've just retired from working from Airbus Defence and Space, based in Stevenage, where I spent 43 years working in the space industry. Unlike most people, most of the other STEM ambassadors, I didn't go to university. I did an engineering apprenticeship with a company in Luton. And then when I finished that, they didn't have a position for me, so I ended up at Airbus Defence and Space. I really enjoyed my career. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. At the age of 25, I was in South America working on the launch site where we launch Ariane rockets. And I've got bits of equipment that I worked on sitting on the surface of Mars. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Lovely, thank you. So we've already had our first question through. So the question is, what A-levels did you take? And I think that came pretty swiftly after Elaine spoke. So Elaine, what A-levels did you take?
I'm just going to completely rock the boat and say that I grew up in Scotland, so I didn't do any A-levels. I did advanced hires, which are the Scottish equivalent. But I did biology, chemistry and maths, and I also did music. The music one was just more for fun than for career progression, but I think that's also important.
I think often our scientists take subjects like music. I think there's a definite link between being creative musically and being scientific.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So Elizabeth, you did mention, didn't you, I think, which A-levels you took. But I don't know if you want to just quickly remind everybody.
Yep, so I did maths, further maths, physics and chemistry. If you want to go into engineering, definitely you should be taking maths and physics. Quite often they like another science subject, which is why I did chemistry. But I mean, I also quite liked chemistry. And then further maths, definitely things are explained much better in further maths than they are in standard maths. So I think it just helps your understanding. If you have the option, I would recommend taking it.
We just had another question through. How did everyone know which career to go into and what inspired you? Amazing question. That's actually one on my list as well. So Rad, how about you? How did you know that was going to be the career for you?
So I actually started out doing the same A-levels as Elizabeth. And about 2 weeks in, I swapped further maths for product design. So it was then maths, product design, chemistry and physics. And that was because I just kind of needed a little bit more variety in what I was doing. Like sitting in a classroom and just learning theoretical stuff was kind of draining for me. When it was coming time, sort of end of the first year of A-levels, I was looking at between studying physics at university and architecture. And I was sort of struggling to get the balance in between that kind of science and maths, which is something I really, really loved, and that kind of creativity and that sort of being able to think outside the box. And I was at an event kind of like this, and they were doing a panel on engineering and studying engineering at uni. I think it was by Cambridge Uni. And it was like just a light bulb clicked. I was like, oh my God, like this is perfect. Because I'd sort of heard people talking about engineering. I didn't really know what it was. And we talked about like what kind of modules I'd be studying as part of this course and maybe where that might lead to in terms of like future career fields. And it was like this light bulb had just gone off for me. And I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. Like I sort of will still have this design side of things as well as being able to keep that kind of science, maths and structure to it. And that's how I ended up on my course.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, how about you? Because obviously you decided to obviously do an apprenticeship scheme to go into engineering.
So yeah, when I was doing what was called O levels when I was at school, there wasn't the drive to send everybody off to university that there is now, and more people did engineering apprenticeships. And as a kid, I just enjoyed taking things apart and things like that, and getting them to work and building stuff. Maths and physics were probably amongst my better subjects at school, along with woodwork and metalwork. So as an apprentice, I did ONC, Ordinary National Certificate, which is like the equivalent to A levels. And then from then I went on and did HND, which is like the first few years of a degree subject. But that was in mechanical engineering. And then I did an extra year, which brought it up to degree level, but the course wasn't accredited as a degree. So I left, finished my apprenticeship with the equivalent of a degree in education, but not a degree certificate. And in the last few years, I actually did an Open University degree while I was working in order to get so I could have a BSc after my name, which was, when I got my first letter from the Open University, which had my name with BSc after it, I was really impressed with that. So I was quite pleased to achieve that.
Oh, that's a lovely story. So, I mean, I've got a kind of question, I suppose, that kind of goes on from that. So if you knew that you wanted to pursue those particular careers, are there any particular good resources that you would suggest people look at to find out more about their particular career path into your different sectors? And I don't mind who answers that question.
I would probably say that, I know it's really hard to say it right now, but I'd say go and do work experience, go and see if you actually enjoy doing the job. I feel quite strongly about the fact that I don't think science as a career is the same as science in school. Science in school is very much like learning things from a book and then regurgitating them in the exam. And as a scientist now, a lot of my job is problem solving and troubleshooting and trying to work out why something's not quite worked the way that I expected it to work and what do I need to change the next time. So it's a lot more, maybe I guess, practical, but it's more about a way of thinking than it is about what it is that you actually know. I did, I guess, back into the inspiring career. I was always interested in biology, and that, especially in my school and people around me, that sort of suggested to everyone that I would be a doctor. And I did work experience in a hospital and absolutely hated it. So I found that I was really interested in the science, sort of behind the scenes science, and I ended up doing another work experience placement in a university lab. And I was like, yes, this is what I felt like I'd wanted to sign up for. And I know it's such a horrible thing to say right now because a lot of the opportunities to do that sort of thing are not as readily available right now as they usually would be. But sending emails to people, being the worst someone will do is not reply. Just using the internet, finding people that look like they're doing interesting things and just saying, hi, can you give me some advice? What sort of things would you find useful? I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that.
I would say for me, one, I used to love doing things like this, like the school would put on, you know, like a STEM event or careers or like a talk or something, and I'd always go to those. And that really opened my eyes to some of the stuff that I maybe wouldn't have considered otherwise. The other thing is that I know this is a little bit biased, but the Institute of Mechanical Engineers is always putting on like free talks, events, and they do like regional ones. So wherever you are, you can go to your local sort of hub and they'll put on like these talks and things. And they tend to be run by people who have nothing really to do with the institution. They just knew someone and they've sort of called them up, and it's like an hour or two on an evening of them just talking about what makes them like really, really so excited about their job, and like really, really getting into like just something so specific and niche that you were like, how have you ended up here? And they always give out the contact details, so you get a chance to like sort of see them. You can talk to them separately. I've done so much of that, just badgering people with my questions. And also they do loads of online like videos, courses. They did a really good webinar just now from the people who did that ventilator project, the ones that worked with like Mercedes F1 and UCL. They did like an hour long presentation of how it happened and who they got in contact with and the guy who'd been in charge of it. And it was just so good to kind of see where you maybe wouldn't find out through things like school or a careers fair, just someone's like random niche. And you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about anyone being that specifically into this branch of renewable energy, but actually I've just sat and listened to you talk about it for 3 hours and you love it and you made it sound amazing. So yeah, definitely that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it is about being proactive, isn't it? And taking up all of those different opportunities that are out there. And I go back to Elaine's comment about work experience, where she had been on one that she didn't like. And I think that's probably just as valid as going on work experience that you absolutely love. I think that's what work experience is out there for, isn't it? To kind of suss out what you do and you don't like. And it's okay to spend a week, like you say, in a hospital and realising that that actually isn't the career path for you, because the worst thing that could happen is that you then obviously start to agree that, you know, you're not actually going to be interested in pursuing afterwards. So I think work experience is key. And that kind of links to a question that someone's asked about what can they do currently during lockdown? Are there any online courses that you would recommend? And obviously I think you covered obviously some of the mechanical engineer and the Institute of Mechanical Engineers sessions. Has anyone got any other things that they've seen? You think
the Royal Society in London does quite a few sessions in the evening. I've been to quite a few of those, and they now stream them live, so you don't have to travel all the way up to London. And they're very good, you know, and they cover a whole range of subjects. And the Royal Society also does a Summer of Science or something, which is I think it's running now or very shortly.
Yeah,
they're well worth watching.
Absolutely. And then the next question was, do you think it's compulsory, Elaine, to take chemistry and biology in your sector, or would maths and physics be okay?
A lot of the subjects recommended are usually specifically for degree courses, and I guess it's more about building up your skills repertoire that you can then show off. So I've got friends who now work in biology that did chemistry degrees. I know that's not a huge jump, but I'm sure you'll be able to find courses. Actually, my course was natural sciences, so I was on the same course as all of the physicists, and I knew that I never wanted to do physics, but I think that means that the qualifications to get onto the course are usually something like maths and 1 science or something along those lines. And you then, if you then want to do all biology modules, your tutor would maybe be like, are you sure that you'll have the background knowledge for that? But it's more, specifically for uni courses. And if there's one that has a qualification that you don't have, maybe look and just, it might not be the right one for you, but I'm sure there's hundreds of others that will be.
The thing about doing a degree level course is it teaches you how to analyze things and study things in a certain methodology, so that, you know, and you can apply those skills and that methodology to whatever subject you end up doing, as Elaine said, you know. So yeah, it's not necessarily all about the subject, but although it helps if you're really interested in the subject, but it's acquiring those skills and knowledge to do the things that will enable you to do your job. And yeah, you could end up studying history and end up being an administrator in a hospital. You know, it's all about acquiring skills.
A great course you can go into if you have done maths and physics and you're interested in going into medical is biomedical engineering. So that's really good if you want to work in hospital, work in medical device development, or go into kind of life sciences and pharmaceuticals, that kind of thing. You can do a biomedical engineering degree.
Brilliant.
I would second that, having done one. My course was combined, and you can very much go into the science side of things, and loads of my tutors were actually like active researchers, and hearing about the research they did, and my dissertation project ended up being a sort of scientific research rather than engineering design, and it was great. I really recommend that.
We've had another question through, which is about Uni Applications. So can you mention attending these types of lectures and all the courses that you go on your applications?
Yes, absolutely. What your personal statement really should do is what is it about you that makes you different from every other candidate who also has the same A levels. I think I mentioned on mine, my school, we had a sort of like a lunchtime club type thing that we would, it was about biomedical research, and people would bring in articles and things that they found interesting and we would discuss them. So that sort of thing, I struggled quite a lot. I feel like there's a bit of a gap in what's available online between things that are designed for kids, and there's obviously lots of really fun science at home videos and things, especially right now. And then there's a bit of a gap before you go into specific scientific papers that require you to have a lot of previous knowledge and jargon and things like that to fully understand reading a paper. So I struggle to find resources, and I'm there as well because I'm not an expert in hundreds and hundreds of things. I found Nature, the journal, they have a thing called Nature Briefing, where they send you a daily email of here's what's happened in science in the world today. And a lot of their articles, not necessarily their research papers, but are pitched at the wider public. There must be more than that, but that's just the one that I get in my inbox every morning.
I think as well, if you're mentioning different sessions that you've been to and things that you've read, obviously if you then get invited to interview, then there's an obvious thing that they may well then ask you about, and you'll feel like you're the expert in the room, that you've got something to kind of talk about, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable about that.
Yeah.
And we've had another question through. How valuable are extra skills like playing an instrument or drawing when applying for a science-based university course?
Super valuable, especially, sorry, just tying in with the last question as well. I think the more you can talk about that makes you an interesting person, the better you're going to be all round. Going to these kind of careers, it's not always just about knowing the science and memorizing every single equation or whatever. It's being able to interact with the people, and if you can strike up a conversation, have a chat with someone, then you're much more likely to become friends and be able to work together, and they're much more likely to help you, and it just sort of goes around a little bit better, you know. Like if you're a more interesting person, more well-rounded, you're more easy to be around, and it makes you better in other fields as well, because you get a better appreciation for things. I think having done product design, I was pretty good at sketching when I got to uni, and then when I was in my first group project, I was just sort of lumped with all the hand drawing sections because I was like, oh my god, someone can draw, and I was like, oh yeah, I can. I didn't do this for uni, but it's useful. And I think, yeah, definitely, it's a nice stress relief as well.
Absolutely.
When I was interviewing a graduate for a job at Airbus, he had been he was on a year in the States with the university, and he damaged his arm, and he damaged it quite badly, and there was a lecture at the university about the structure of his wrist, part of the medical course, and he went along just to see and fully understand what was happening to his wrist, you know. And during the interview, that really impressed me, and that was one of the reasons why I gave him the job. And he turned out to be a really good guy, actually. But you know, it was because he was prepared to go a bit, you know, think outside the box, and try and used his knowledge as a mechanical engineer to understand what was happening inside his arm, and the operation that he was going to have to repair it, you know. And that really impressed me. And so I think, you know, what Elaine and Rad have said, you need to show that you're a well-rounded, diverse person capable of doing lots of different things, and you can bring those different bits of knowledge and skills into your job. And there's no telling what bit of information that you will pick up somewhere in your life where you will end up using that.
I think you're right. You know, I think certainly from my own perspective, even within my sort of career within teaching, and STEM, as a chemistry teacher and a computer science teacher, that actually I use the fact that I studied art and music almost every day. There are skills within that I utilise within my career. So we've also had a question through about what it's like in that transition from sixth form and university to then going into the world of work.
So I've probably done this most recently. So I finished sixth form around a year ago now. When I first started my job, I was really nervous because I didn't have very much practical experience. Like, unlike Rad, I hadn't had an opportunity to do any product design or anything like that. So I didn't know how to use any of the things in the workshop, or do any lab work really. But in kind of, if you do A-levels or something equivalent to that, you pick up a lot of skills when you do practicals in terms of like how to plan and experiment scientifically, how to record data properly, and people are like, they've hired you because they think you have something to bring to the workforce, and so you just need to be confident, and if you have something to say, just say it, because they are interested in hearing what you have to say. And people are also very open to, if you just ask them like, oh, how do I do this, they're very happy to tell you. And now, like 11 months on, like people are coming to me and asking like, how do I use this piece of equipment, or how do I set up the data logger, and then I'm happy to tell them. So it's not as scary as you think it's going to be.
Are there any other things that you wish you had known or had been prepared for within sixth form, other than obviously the subjects that you studied? What else do you think would have been useful to have known before?
So some of the useful things to know are just kind of how to live as an adult. So we had to figure out we got our pay slips and the tax codes on them were wrong. So we had to like call up the government and be like, hi, please can you change the tax codes on my pay slips? Learning how to pay council tax, all that kind of stuff. They don't really teach you at school, but it's helpful to know how to budget properly. There's lots of really good personal finance apps out there, like Monzo and Yolt and those kind of things, I'd really recommend.
That's really good advice. Someone's had another question. How did you revise for A-levels or the equivalent? What was your revision strategy? What's the answer?
Just do lots of past questions if you can. So I just did loads of like past papers. I think that's the best way to do it, really. I was one of the years that had the new A-levels, so there weren't as many past questions, so you can do specimen papers, and although the format of the questions have changed, you can use previous iterations of the exam board as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice. As a teacher, I would second that, and obviously not seeing it as just being completely unloaded, to actually obviously make your notes as you go, and to work hard for the individual little end of topic tests, because that's all part of that bigger picture as you go forward to that end exam, would be my advice as a teacher to those of you who are studying hard for A-levels.
I'm not sure if I don't know how much you go into it, but it really helps to know as a person what helps you learn. I know I'm a very visual person, so I would I bought poster paper from IKEA, the things that you put on the kids' easels, and I would just like paper my walls and draw mind maps and pictures and things like that. I had some friends that would record themselves speaking their notes and like listen back to them while they're doing other things. That didn't work for me. But if you know like what's specific to you, but again, past papers, there's literally no better practice than seeing what would have happened if you were in that room a year before.
When I was doing my Open University courses, we don't write anything anymore. We type everything. And like the others, I bought some past papers and I sat down for 3 hours and I wrote for 3 hours to get into the habit of writing, because your handwriting just deteriorates so abysmally, and your hand starts to ache after an hour or so, you know. So you really need to practice writing. I mean, it sounds silly, but yes, you need to practice writing and to be able to keep writing for 3 hours. You know, it's is an A-level course still 3 hours?
Can be, depends on the subject.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic piece of advice, because obviously as a teacher, I've also worked as an examiner, and it can sometimes be incredibly difficult to decipher what is written. And you can't really give the benefit of the doubt sometimes. So making sure what you've written is clear is ultimately very, very important, especially as the papers are scanned in and they're marked online. So you will lose some quality in that as well. So it's just really important. I would definitely second what you've just said, Paul.
Yeah, no, I mean, I sat and looked at one of my papers and I could see the deterioration of my handwriting through the 3 hours. You know, it's I'm great admiration for the people who had to mark the paper.
So we've had a fantastic question through from Karen. How have you dealt with situations where you might have lacked in confidence about your ambitions or have been nervous about attending interviews?
I did like a million interviews for my grad job. And I can say this because I went through months and months of being like, I can't believe I've not got a job. I can't believe I keep getting, like, I got every interview and I just couldn't get the job. And I was so like in my own head about, well, this is because I'm the worst person in the world. This is because I performed terribly, because I didn't know this, because I didn't know that, until I got to this job and everything just slotted into place. I think you're going to be nervous. You're going to not know stuff. If they're going to give you a really, really hard time about being someone coming fresh out of sixth form, fresh out of uni, in between uni years, applying for an internship, and they want to give you a really hard time about not knowing X, Y, Z, it's not somewhere you want to work. You want to be somewhere where they'll be like, oh, you didn't know that. It's okay. Let me show you how to do it. So next time you encounter this, you'll know. And then you go on to the next question and then you feel better and you can do that. And that's so important. And it's so hard to get into your head when you're sat in an interview and someone's grilling you and you're like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's something that just kind of comes in hindsight, I guess. That's just not very helpful, is it? Definitely, you won't know things. Don't be afraid to not know things. Everyone's got a confusing spot or I'd never heard of that before. Just a gap in your knowledge that you maybe should have had, but you don't. It happens. It happens to everyone.
I think in that situation, to be honest and say that you're not sure, but actually you're really willing to learn. And, you know, and I think, like you said, most companies that are worth their salt will obviously want to invest time in training and supporting you. So it is difficult though to be honest when you're not sure about something.
It's such a likable quality as well though, when you're talking to someone, they say, oh, I didn't know, could you tell me a bit more? And then you get to tell them whatever you want. And they're nice about it rather than them just being a bit standoffish and then going away to Google it later. Like, just be open about it, you know?
Yeah. Like you say, any good company will have a culture of helping people. And that's very important.
And completely, especially at the early stages when people are looking for summer students, internships, recent grads. From my experience, people don't expect you to know anything about the job that you're going into. They want to hire someone who they can train to be the person that best fits in their company. So, and I'd say most interviews are the same. They don't, obviously once you get more senior and they're hiring people to fill a specific role, if you don't fit that role, that's fine. But at the early stages, they want to see people who can learn and who has a mindset that fits. And it's, yeah, again, it doesn't sound very helpful, but it's for you to see whether you like the company just as much as it's for the company to see whether they like you.
Do you think as well that comes back again to then having outside interests? It's so difficult, I think, when students are studying for their A-levels and for their degrees to kind of be so focused on their subject. But I would absolutely agree with you, Elaine, about the fact that actually there's more to it when you're employing someone. You're looking at the whole person and how that person's going to fit into your team. And so you will look at things like their extracurricular pursuits, the things that they like to do that makes them tick. So don't push all of those things that you love doing to one side and just solely sort of focus on the subjects that you're studying. They're important, but you probably have a whole nother part of you that makes you who you are, and that's what they're really interested in. We've also had a question about what keeps you motivated when you're at work and having a bad day. We've all had them.
I always remember one day at work, I was running and looking after equipment for 3 different spacecraft, the same product, but for 3 different spacecraft. And we were in so much trouble on so many aspects of the manufacturing process. Everything seemed to be going wrong. And I remember walking out of the office one day to go down onto the manufacturing floor to have a look at yet another problem. And I thought, we are never, ever going to get out of this. It was just every minute something came in that something wasn't working right. But there is always a solution. You just take in the data, analyze it, break it down into little chunks and work your way through it, and you will find a solution. There is always a solution, I used to say to young graduates. It doesn't matter how dire you think things are, there will always be a solution to your problem. You will always find some way out of what seems insurmountable. And 6 months later, we had delivered all the hardware and they all got launched. And here we are 20 years later, and some of them are still working in orbit perfectly. So, yeah, you just got to use your experience and knowledge. Break it. If it's an enormous problem, just break it down into little chunks and solve the little chunks one by one, and eventually you will get to the end of the problem.
I think be honest as well. If you're having a bad day, be honest with your colleagues and share that, because you'll probably find that there's somebody else that can is either having the same issue or has had experience and can support you with whatever that is that's not quite going right that day. And I'm always, saying that to the people I work with, my colleagues, to sort of come to me and let me know if they've made a mistake or if they're having difficulties at home or whatever it is. It's, to share with your team is how you progress forward. We've had a good question, which specifically I think to you, Paul. Do you ever get to fly in a spacecraft you helped to make, or an aircraft?
No, I never. No, because they were, they weren't man-rated spacecraft. But I did get to see loads of, not loads, about half a dozen launches, and they are phenomenal. First one I saw got destroyed 1 minute into the launch, but there we go, which is a real bummer. It's very soul destroying for the people when you lose a satellite on a launch. Thing is, you could have worked on the satellite for 5 or 6 years, and it's like a child. And although when it's going to be launched, you're never going to see it, it's up there, and that if you went to the operations center, you could talk to a guy who's controlling it. So, but when it gets destroyed on launch, it's like losing a child. So that was very, very sad when the launch vehicle got destroyed and they lost the payload, because some people had invested years of their life in it.
I think that then links to another question that's just come through, is how do you build on your skills and work on the errors that you might have made? So in that particular situation, how did the team recover from that?
when they lost the launch vehicle, it was the second launch of Ariane back in 1980. They found out that there was a fundamental design flaw with the engine, with the combustion chamber, to do with the ratios between the size of the chamber and the injection ports. And it took them about 18 months to resolve it. They initiated an enormous program of work with tens, 20s, 30s of firings, static firings on the engine, but they resolved it. And like I said a little while ago, they broke the problem down into little chunks. They analyzed the little chunks and they sorted out the little chunks, and eventually they got to the end point. But you'll find any good company will have in place a process for doing that. You get the experienced engineers, who run the departments. They will set up fault tree analysis, and you'll break it all down into different bits, and then you'll analyze the individual faults and that people have suggested, and you try and resolve, each little problem individually. And some of them you discard straight away, others you work on, and eventually you get to the solution. But it's breaking it down into little chunks.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the things that is the most enjoyable for me about working in the area of STEM. It is that kind of methodical approach, the looking back and evaluating. That's kind of what it means to sort of work within this arena, I think. So we've had another question from Karen, which links back to subject knowledge and transferable skills. So in addition to your subject knowledge and your interests, what transferable skills have you found most helpful in your role?
I think doing a sport or any kind of group activity that teaches you teamwork outside of a group project scenario, because you still do a group project at school or uni, and it's a very different mindset, and you're sort of like, oh, I've got to win, I hate these people. Oh. Whereas if you do a sport, you are very much working together. So I did lacrosse, and I think that really, really helped me, because you have to be you can't just be bossing people around and assigning them things without any second thought. You've got to think about what their interests and strengths are, and how they're going to feel and how they're going to perform the way that you sort of place them, and having to be that sort of friendly kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, that sort of mediator role when people are starting to get a bit tetchy as well. I think it's just so underrated as a skill. It's not just about get the task done if everyone's going to be not speaking at the end,
Any others?
I do a lot of performing arts and theatre things, and completely agree with the complete teamwork aspect. Whenever we do a show, there's about probably 20 of us in a cast, and we have to work together. And I guess it's the same with a group project, but we're all there because we love to be there, and there's no point in hating people around, because then you're just going to have a really bad 6 months or however long like that. But that's also helped me a lot with confidence in presentation, because I'm, I guess, more than happy to now stand up in front of a group of people and just talk, usually ramble. So that's a big one for me.
So linked to that, when you're working in a team, how do you handle difficult people? Has anyone had any experience of having to work with difficult members of your team, and how have you handled that?
Yes, so one of the things I had several years ago, I had two graduates working for me. One was French, the other one was English. The English guy was very good. The French guy wasn't so good. The French guy thought he was the bee's knees. The English guy was, fairly laid back. And one of the first jobs I got to do was to review their performance for a pay review. And so I thought, what can I do? I've got this questionnaire to do. So in the end, I gave both graduates the form for themselves to fill in, and then I also gave the form to the people they were working with. And when I got all the results back, I sat down with the graduates and went through the form. Now, French people behave a lot different to English people. French people are much more submissive, whereas English people in a meeting will tend to speak up out of turn sometimes. French people don't do that. And this French guy just didn't do that. And I said to him, look, you've got to be more involved in you know, if the guy you're working for tells you to do something and you disagree with him, then tell him that you don't think he's doing the right thing, you know. Ask him why he's doing it that way, discuss it with him. And anyway, Nigel, the bloke who was looking after the French guy, said, what did you say to Elaine? He said, he argued with me for the first time when we were doing something on a project. And in the end, I let him do it because he'd argued, you know. So I think you have to be honest with people. And although it is difficult managing people, if you're honest with them, then you get the best out of them.
And then we've had another question through is, how do you know whether you're heading in the right direction in life or work? It's a big question.
I'm going to be bold here and say that you don't. I think I don't know if it's probably not the same in all the companies, but we've got a very structured, I think it's because we're a huge company, quite a structured career ladder. So it's really obvious, and there's spreadsheets with job descriptions and things. So I guess in that way, it's quite obvious. For the job above mine, this is what they're looking for. What can I do to start to bring those skills into what I do now? But quite frequently, and because I do a lot of this stuff and speak to a lot of people who had been scientists for years and had suddenly gone off to do science communication or something that does still involve science, but is not completely, that's just a complete tangent, and you don't necessarily know if it's, I don't think you know that it's the right direction, but it's just following things that you enjoy. And
if you enjoy it,
sounds interesting.
I would agree with that.
If you enjoy going to work, you know, if you dread getting up and going to work, then you're in the wrong place.
It's not necessarily what you might think either. You might be sort of progressing up this career ladder and, you know, ticking all the boxes. But again, if you're, like Paul said, if you're not happy, then you're not making the right choices for you. My friend's mum was a corporate lawyer. It's not STEM, I know, but bear with me. A corporate lawyer. She lived in London years and years, you know, like super high flying, wears these suits and heels to work, earning loads and loads of money. And then one day she just quit and she moved to Wales and she opened a workshop refurbing like furniture and stuff. She does like paints people's kitchen doors now, and she's so happy. She wears dungarees all day and she's just living her life. And, you know, I don't think she ever at the beginning of her law career thought that was going to be the possibility and where she'd end up, but it is where she's ended up, and it's completely her choice and she's loving it. So
we've just got a couple more minutes before the session's finished. I've definitely got one more question to kind of return to, but if you've got any burning questions that you want to ask before the session finishes, then please post them now. I've got a question here which is, have you ever got to meet influential or famous people in your careers?
Had lunch with Richard Lenski, which is a very niche biology famous person, but he started an experiment, I think back in the 70s or 80s, where he looked at E. coli evolution, and he had E. coli in a bubble or in like a pod, and he would keep splitting them. And from this work, which is still ongoing, it's called something like the long-term E. coli evolution experiment. We've learned so much about how things evolve and natural selection and things like that based on the work that he's done. And he gave a talk at my uni, and the person I was working with at the time was involved in, I don't know, getting him to come and give this speech, and got to have lunch with him. That's, I guess maybe that's the thing, that someone who's hugely influential in my field is maybe not, I've not met David Attenborough. That's what I'm going with here.
I think as you progress, you get like this idea of what a celebrity is, and you start to find really niche people that you consider famous. So I'm like, I met Ben Ryan, and now I have him as a connection on LinkedIn, and I actually think that I'm like a celebrity because we're LinkedIn connections. And obviously, like, I'm guessing none of you know who he is, because to me, I'm like, oh, but like no one else bothered at all. He works in prosthetics. It's really cool. Read his story if you get a chance.
So when I was working on Beagle 2, I got to meet Colin Pillinger, and I know Beagle 2 sort of dropped out of people's memories now because it was, you know, what, 15, 16 years ago. So I met Colin Pillinger, and we also met people from Blur, because Blur generated a signal tone which was installed on Beagle 2 that had it have spoken back to Earth, then the signal tone that Blur generated would have been the first thing that it would have sent. So.
And so the last question we're going to take is, should you allow others to influence your decisions? No.
No, don't do that. That's it. Just don't do that.
I'm going to be controversial and say not necessarily influence your decisions, but don't assume that you're right all the time. If someone has not if someone's obviously said, oh no, you shouldn't do that, and I'm not going to tell you why, just don't, like, you should listen to people's opinions and take advice on board, but you don't need to follow all of the advice that you're given.
That's a good piece of advice, Elaine. Absolutely. So I think that brings us to the sort of drawing to the end of the session. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists today for giving up their time and sharing their insights into their careers in STEM. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. We've got many more careers sessions on Stream 1 and Stream 2 for secondary, so you can find out a little bit more about different careers in particular sectors. So if you get an opportunity, then please, you can follow those links from the Zoom page, or you can watch it live streamed from the website. But, from me, thank you very much, and I hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.